Robert Duvall was fishing alone on the Rappahannock River when a boy of about 10 sat down on the bank nearby without saying anything. They fished together in silence for an hour before Duvall understood why the boy was really there. What he did before he packed up his rod and walked home is something that boy, now in his 30s, has never stopped thinking about. It was a Tuesday morning in September 2012, and the stretch of the Rappahannock that ran through the edge of Duvall's property in Rappahannock County was doing what it did in early September, running clear and low after a dry August, the water the color of weak tea in the shadows and almost transparent in the shallows where the sun reached the bottom. Duvall had been out since 7, which was earlier than usual, because September mornings on that stretch of river had a quality that other months didn't, and he had learned over the years that the quality was available only to the people who arrived before it burned off. He was working a slow bend about a quarter mile from the house when the boy appeared. He'd caught 2 small bass in the first hour and released both of them, which was his usual practice on this stretch. He fished for the fishing rather than for the fish, which was a distinction that his neighbors in the county understood and that his colleagues in the film industry had occasionally found puzzling. He came through the trees on the far bank with the specific combination of care and purposefulness that children have when they are going somewhere they have been before and know the way. He picked his way down the bank to the water's edge without looking at his feet, which meant he knew the terrain, the route that crosses the path at shin height, the loose stone at the water's edge that shifts when you step on it. He had been here before. He knew this stretch of river. The bank that was not Duvall's property, but county land, accessible by a trail that locals used, and made his way down to the water's edge with the careful, deliberate movements of a child who has been told to be quiet near a person who is fishing and who is taking the instructions seriously. He was about 10 years old, dark-haired, wearing a school backpack that he set down on the bank before he sat on a flat rock at the water's edge. He had a fishing rod, a child's rod, the kind that comes in a kit from the hardware store, with a bobber still attached to the line. He did not say anything. Duvall noted him and returned to his cast. This was not unusual. The stretch of county land across the river was used by several families in the area, and he had fished in the presence of other people on that bank before, sometimes talking, more often not, both parties understanding that the river was a shared resource and that the sharing required a certain quality of mutual consideration that expressed itself primarily as silence. The boy was observing this without being told. Duvall appreciated this without saying so. They fished in silence for 20 minutes. The silence had the specific quality of a silence between two people who are both doing something and who are both willing to let the doing be sufficient without filling the space around it. Duvall had fished in the presence of many people over the years. The ones he remembered were the ones who could be quiet. The boy was not a skilled fisherman. His casts were short and imprecise, the line landing in roughly the right direction but not with the control that comes from practice, and he retrieved too quickly, without the patience that river fishing requires. But he was trying, with the focused, slightly effortful attention of someone doing something that requires more skill than they currently have, and who is committed to the attempt anyway. At some point, Duvall said, without looking at the boy, "Slow the retrieve, let it drift." The boy slowed his retrieve. After another 20 minutes, Duvall said, "Try the shadow on the far side of that rock." The boy cast toward the rock. The cast was better than the previous ones. They fished. The conversation that developed over the following hour was the kind that develops between two people who are doing something together that requires most of their attention, intermittent, unhurried, built around the activity rather than around the people conducting it. The boy's name was Owen. He was in 5th grade at the elementary school in Washington. He had been fishing with his father since he was 6. He liked the river because it was quiet and because you had to pay attention to it, which was different from most things. Duvall listened to this with the part of his attention that was not on the river. The boy talked about the river and the fish and the school year starting, the specific texture of a September that has just shifted from summer to something else, the way the school cafeteria smells on the first day. In a way, it doesn't smell the rest of the year. The teacher he had this year, who was strict in a way that was fair rather than arbitrary, which he understood as a distinction without having the language for it yet. He talked in the slightly accelerated way of someone who has been alone with their thoughts for a while and is finding the presence of another person a relief. He talked about his dog, which was named Carter, after a president he had been told was good, which he accepted on faith because he was 10 and had not yet developed a strong position on the Carter administration. He talked about most things that a 10-year-old talks about when given space to talk, which is to say, he talked around the edges of the thing he was not talking about with the specific, slightly careful attention of someone who knows there is something in the middle that he is going around. Duvall recognized this. He had been watching people do it for 50 years. The specific quality of a conversation that is avoiding something, the way the available topics are deployed with slightly more emphasis than they naturally warrant, as if the speaker is using them to fill space that would otherwise be occupied by the true subject. He had done it himself. He recognized it in Owen with the peripheral, unhurried certainty of someone who knows what he is looking at. He waited. This was not a calculated patience. It was not the patience of someone who has decided to wait and is tracking the waiting. It was the natural patience of someone who has learned that most things arrive in their own time and that rushing toward them changes what they are. He did not rush toward it. He continued fishing, continued the intermittent conversation, continued giving Owen space to talk around the edges for as long as the edges needed. The river ran. The morning moved forward. A kingfisher appeared on a branch above the far bank and departed. The quality of the light changed in the way it changes in September when the morning is giving way to the mid-morning. At 9:40, Duvall said, "Your father fish with you?" Owen was quiet for a moment. "He used to," he said. Duvall waited. "He's in the hospital," Owen said. "He's been there since June." The word June landed in the quiet of the river with the specific weight of a word that has been not said for a long time and is finally said, and Duvall received it with the stillness that words with that weight require. "What happened?" he asked. He asked it in the plain, direct way of someone who believes that people who are carrying something deserve to have it asked about rather than managed. Owen told him. He told him what his father had, the diagnosis which he had heard from the doctors, but understood in the specific partial way that a 10-year-old understands medical information that has been carefully managed by adults who are trying to tell the truth without telling all of it. He understood enough. He understood that his father was very sick, and that the outcome was not certain, and that the hospital room had become, over 3 months, a kind of center of gravity for the family that pulled everything toward it and left everything else slightly off balance, which he understood imperfectly, but had heard enough times to reproduce accurately, and the specific facts of the hospital situation that a 10-year-old accumulates over 3 months of his father being somewhere he is not. The room number, the name of the nurse he liked, the day of the week when his mother came home from visiting looking the most tired. He told Duvall that his father had taught him to fish on this stretch of river, on a flat rock not far from where Owen was sitting, on a Saturday morning 4 years ago when the light was doing exactly what it was doing right now. He said this last part, looking at the light on the water. Duvall was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the water, at the particular quality of September light that Owen had been looking at when he talked about the Saturday morning 4 years ago. He was thinking about something that he was not going to say, about loss and about fathers and about the specific education that a man gives a son on a riverbank that is not about fishing, or not only about fishing, and that the son only understands later, and that he understood himself only much later than he would have liked. Then he said, "He taught you to slow the retrieve." Owen looked at him. "He always says that," Owen said, "every time." "Good advice," Duvall said. They fished for another 20 minutes. The conversation did not return to the hospital or to Owen's father. There was nothing more to be said that the saying had not already done, and both of them seemed to understand this without discussing it. They talked about the kingfisher, which had returned to the branch. They talked about whether the fish in this stretch of river were smarter than fish in other stretches, which was a question that admitted of no satisfying answer, but that produced, in the consideration of it, a pleasant 15 minutes. At 10:15, Duvall reeled in his line. "I'm heading in," he said. Owen nodded. Duvall broke down his rod and collected his things. He was about to start up the bank when he stopped. He reached into the pocket of his vest. the fishing vest he'd been wearing for years, which had the specific worn quality of a piece of equipment that has been taken out in all weathers and in all moods, and that is absorbed in the way that frequently used things do, something of the texture of the life that used it, the one he wore every time he came to the river, worn in the specific way of equipment that has been used regularly for years, and took out a small pocket knife. It was not an expensive knife, not a notable knife. It was a plain single-blade pocket knife of the kind that men carry for the practical uses that a knife serves and that accumulates over years of use, the specific patina of something that has been handled a great deal. He crossed to the water's edge and held it out to Owen. Owen looked at it. "For when he gets back," Duvall said. "Something to fish with." Owen took the knife. He held it for a moment in the way you hold something when you are not sure yet what it means, but you know it means something. "Thank you," he said. Duvall walked up the bank and through the trees toward home. Owen sat on the flat rock for a while after Duvall had gone. He turned the knife over in his hands. He opened and closed it. It was the kind of knife that has a satisfying action, the blade opening with a solid, definite click that says the thing is well made and has been well used. He put it in the pocket of his jeans. He packed up his fishing rod. He was home by noon. Owen's mother found out that evening. Owen came home from the river and showed her the knife and told her about the man on the other bank who had taught him to slow the retrieve and who had given him something for when his father got back. She asked what the man's name was. Owen said he didn't know. She asked him to describe the man. The description, when she passed it to a neighbor who knew the county well, produced a name. She looked up the name. She sat at the kitchen table for a while. She did not reach out. There was nothing to say that the morning on the river hadn't already said, and she understood this in the way that parents understand things about their children's important days, as something to be received rather than responded to. Owen's father came home in December. Owen showed him the knife on Christmas morning. He told him about the man on the other bank. His father turned the knife over in his hands. "Good advice," his father said. About the retrieve. He was quiet for a moment, in the way he was quiet when he was thinking about something he was going to say carefully. "Did you slow it?" "Yes," Owen said. "Catch anything?" "No," his father nodded. "Good advice anyway," he said. "The knife is Owen's. He has it now, in his 30s, in a house in a different part of Virginia. He fishes when he can, which is not as often as he would like. When he does, he slows the retrieve the way the man on the far bank told him to, and the way his father told him before that, and he thinks about the Tuesday morning in September when the river was low and clear, and someone he never saw again understood something he had not been able to say. If this story reminded you that children carry the same things adults carry and deserve the same quality of attention, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell. More stories about who Robert Duvall really was in the mornings, in the riverbanks, and the quiet, ordinary days are coming every single week. Don't miss one.